one of the things that many people find difficult when doing their EPQ is the argument stage. Now, I'm going to take you through a step-by-step process that will help you create a line of argument that you can use and defend as part of your EPQ. So the question is, how do you do that? How do you develop a line of argument? Now, the first thing to remember is that you are going to be trying to find the answer to a question. Hopefully you realise by now that your EPQ is best done as an attempt to find an answer to a specific question. You're not just looking at a topic, you're not just writing a general essay, you're trying to come up with an answer. So I'm going to take this as my example question. Is sporting success all in the mind? Now, on most questions, there is a spectrum of opinion, and it's helpful in organising your thoughts to try and identify the extreme positions and then the middle positions on the spectrum. Now, you can make this more complicated, but let's keep it simple. I'm going to assume that there are basically three possible answers to the question, is sporting success all in the mind? A is the view that sporting success is purely mental. C is the position that sporting success is purely physical. And B is the position that it's a bit of both. Sporting success depends on both your mind and your body. Now you can see that those views lie along, if you like, a spectrum, and different thinkers will probably be at different positions on that spectrum. There may be people who go to the extreme and say it really does depend purely on your mind or purely on your body, and probably more commonly people will be in the middle, or perhaps slightly more to one side or the other. But anyway, it doesn't matter at the moment. The key point is we've got a helpful little device for starting to classify the different viewpoints. If I'm going to develop my arguments in an EPQ, it's important to actually know what you're going to argue for. And I would say you need to decide that before you actually start writing the arguments. And my reason for saying that is because many EPQs go wrong because students don't really say what they think until they get to the very end of the project. Maybe they write down their own opinions in the conclusion, for example. And the problem with that is that by the time you get to the conclusion, it's too late to really get into the argument. So what actually goes into the EPQ is more other people's ideas, other people's arguments, but not the person's own views and their own reasons. And really you do need to get stuck into that. It's really important that a good EPQ isn't just descriptive. It actually really does contain analysis, evaluation, and an argument. And the way to do that is to make up your mind what you're going to argue for, and then go into the argument knowing which side you're on. Now, I'm not going to suggest that the middle ground is always right, but often in many of these debates, some position in the centre is more plausible than either of the extremes. It's a kind of fact about human nature. People tend to get polarised when questions that are intrinsically uncertain come up, and people often say slightly extreme things when they do better to be more cautious. So one good way through an EPQ is to try and identify more extreme and implausible views and contrast those with a more sensible middle ground position. So in essence, what I'm suggesting is that although it's not always the best answer, a B is often better than an A or a C. But the key point is decide what you're going to argue before you get into the argument. So suppose then I have decided that I'm going to argue for B. I would then start my discussion section when I'm getting into the arguments in the EPQ with a little introductory paragraph where I do a bit of signposting. Here's just a simple version of it, but you could expand on this if you found some more research sources and examples and maybe quotations to back up the points. So I might start off by saying something about there's a range of different opinions. Some people go one way, some people go another. Some people say it's about your mindset. Other people say that sporting success is basically about physiology and the strength of your body. And then there are some people who take a middle ground position and say that it's both mental and physical factors. I'm also going in my introductory paragraph to explain what I'm going to be arguing. So I would always include a sentence like, in this project, in this dissertation, I will argue that. In my case, I'm going to go for the middle ground position, so I'm going to say sporting success depends on a combination of mental and physical factors. So notice what that introductory paragraph does. It really sets up the discussion really nicely. It shows that you're aware of the spectrum of views, and you can probably add some more details there with some quotations to back that up from research you've done. And it also shows that you've decided where you're going to go in terms of the direction of the argument. Now, this might sound like strange advice, but having said what I'm going to argue, I wouldn't then actually give arguments for my own view. Instead, I'd start with the views I disagree with and attack those, challenge those. This is partly, as the saying says, because the best form of defence is attack. But actually, there's a more important psychological reason behind this. If you're trying to persuade somebody and they disagree with you, then probably when they listen to you, when they hear your reasoning, they'll be always thinking, no, I don't agree. So if you're going to actually make them more receptive and open to hear what you've got to say, it's necessary to challenge their views a little bit. It's necessary to make them think, I wonder if I'm really right about this. So if I think, for example, that sporting success is at least partly a matter of what's going on in the mind, not just about what's going on in the body, and I'm arguing with somebody who thinks it's all about physical strength, then I'm going to want to challenge their views a little bit and make them think, maybe there's another view here that I need to listen to. So I would recommend that instead of putting a positive defence of your own position to start with, you actually go on the offensive and attack the alternative views. So, in the case of my example, if I'm going to defend position B, then I'm going to have to find out what people say who believe in position A, and then I'm going to have to challenge that. And at this point, you need to link your arguments back to your research. Find out what's the best evidence that can be given in defence of position A, and then show why you're not convinced by it. So in my example, if position A is the view that sporting success is purely a matter of what's going on in the mind, I'm going to want to find out the best evidence that supports that statement. What are the studies, what's the research that shows that sporting success is a matter of mindset and attitude? And then why does that not fully persuade me? Why do I think that that's not the whole story? So start off by laying out the evidence and then challenging it for one of the positions you don't agree with. The next step is to do pretty much the same for the other position that you disagree with. Lay out the evidence, show what's the strongest possible case that can be made for that view, and then show why you don't find it persuasive. Finally, when you've done that, put forward your view as a plausible alternative. If we don't find A or C convincing, perhaps B is the best way forward. Of course, you're then going to have to provide supporting evidence for position B and show what its weaknesses are and how you think it can be defended. So that, in essence, is the way in which we can go about constructing a line of argument as part of our EPQ.